This episode features discussions and interviews around sensitive topics that may not be suitable for all listeners.
Hello, and welcome to a shiny new episode of the Problem with Men podcast. It goes without saying that we'd love you joining us to explore the different issues men face. Of course, it also takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money to put each episode together, so we've opened up a PayPal donation page. If you're able to spare a few coins, we'd really appreciate it. But if not, you could also help us hugely by sharing the podcast with a friend or two.
You're listening to the Problem with Men podcast.
In this episode, we're looking at body image. A recent survey by the Mental Health Foundation found that 3 in 10 UK men have felt anxious about the way they look. 1 in 5 men dressed in a way that hid their body. More concerning, though, is that more than 1 in 10 men surveyed had experienced suicidal thoughts and feelings because of body image issues. Men seem to be way behind the curve when it comes to body image awareness. Women are already deep into promoting body positive image, while we're still lingering behind without showing polished six-packs, buff bodies competing on reality shows, and hashtag gains filling our social media feeds. We all have days where our hair won't sit right or we feel a bit bloated. Having issues about our appearance is pretty normal. But what happens when those thoughts and feelings get a little too much?
Everyone has a body image. I have a body image. You have a body image. A body image is simply our internal perception of what our body feels like, looks like, and how we think about our bodies.
Viren Swamy is a professor of social psychology at Anglia Ruskin University, and his main area of research is around body image and trying to promote healthier body images in different populations.
But what we're really talking about here is whether or not people experience negative body image. And what we know is that historically women have, to a large degree, experienced high levels of negative body image. But in the last 10, 20 years, we're also finding that men have increasingly experienced negative body image as well. Most psychologists studying body image will talk about what's called the tripartite influence model. The tripartite influence model simply argues that there are 3 primary sources of information, or 3 primary sources where we get information about what are the ideals in a society. And in childhood, that source tends to be our caregivers or our parents. In adolescence, it tends to be our peers. Also in adulthood, also our peers, but in adulthood becomes mass media. We get most of that information by consuming different forms of mass media. Now, those 3 different sources tell us what is ideal. They tell us what is attractive, and they also tell us the consequences of what it means to not be attractive. But beyond that, they also sell us a version of the body in which the body is inherently malleable. It's something you have a responsibility to constantly work on. You are expected to work on the body, and this ethos of what working on the body is almost so ingrained in us that to not work on the body almost feels inhuman, that you're somehow unhuman if you choose to not work on the body, not choose to not improve your body in some way. Now, all of that can result in negative body image. It's the kind of gaining that information from these 3 different sources and then internalizing the ideals that we are told, we're sold as being ideal, internalizing those ideals and making comparison with those ideals, which leads to negative body image.
One of the big issues is that the ideal body standards we're pushed to aspire to are rarely healthy.
Well, I mean, the ideal body is unhealthy. I think that's the starting point of this conversation. Idealized images of what people look like are inherently unhealthy. I mean, if you look at the kind of idealized female figure, for example, at least in the West now, it's clinically underweight. It is by definition something that people can only attain through excessive dieting. So by its very nature, these ideals that are being presented to us are unhealthy. And similarly with men, the kind of ideal that's being presented as being ideal for men, again, at least in Western societies, is one that can only really be attained if you're willing to spend hours and hours in the gym, if you're willing to diet excessively, if you're willing to spend hours and hours on body work, essentially, to the detriment of, say, your work life, your social life, your relationships, and so on. And the idea that somehow these ideals are there to inspire us or kind of inspire us to be better versions of ourselves is simply not true. These ideals exist to make us feel inadequate.
And of course, there is an incentive for making us feel inadequate.
Well, definitely in Western society, our body ideals are mostly created and perpetuated via the mass media in order to sell lifestyles and products and to keep us wanting, to keep us feeling less than perfect, so that we still go out there and buy products. And it's part of the sort of Western ideology, isn't it, to always be improving on yourself, from since the 70s or 80s, when women were encouraged to work on the body with the Jane Fonda workouts and everything. And now, in the second millennium, the pressure, the market has squeezed about as much as it can out of women. So it's moved on to men, and men now also have lots of disposable income, just like women. And men are being encouraged to groom more. If you look back maybe 20 years ago, probably the amount of products available for men's hair care was very limited. For example, beard care. In my previous life, I was a hairdresser before I got into academia, and there never existed such a thing as like grooming for men and their beards. But now it's a whole huge industry. So it's all tied to sort of consumerism and driving people to spend money and achieve these appearance ideals. That's how I see it, because when you go to other countries, in other cultures, I can't talk about every culture in the world because obviously I haven't researched it and I haven't been to a lot of cultures, but speaking from knowledge about the countries that I've researched and that I've lived in, it's not necessarily the same in all countries. However, the proliferation of the mass media through globalization, through modernization, bringing ideas of Western ideas and Western body ideals, these kind of pressures to look a certain way, are infiltrating through the traditional cultural body ideals in lots of other cultures and countries.
Tracy Thornborough is a lecturer in psychology at the University of Lincoln. Her doctoral research investigated beauty ideals among a rural Nicaraguan population to see what affects our idea of body image.
I think I was pleasantly surprised to find that the default isn't to be unhappy with your body, that it is possible to not have an appearance that reflects a socially constructed appearance ideal and still be happy with your body. People in the communities where we were carrying out our studies, where we were working, obviously, just like here, people have got all sorts of body sizes and shapes, yeah? Some people are bigger, some people are slimmer, some people are curvy, some people are tall, some people are short. But within those communities, whatever people looked like, they loved themselves and they were proud of their bodies and they dressed however they liked to show off their bodies. There isn't this kind of like judgment on people because they look a certain way. Unfortunately, with the increasing influence of Western media, that might be beginning to change.
The idea of being proud of how we look seems like such an abstract concept.
Nicaragua is very interesting. So we carried out a lot of research over a long period of time in Nicaragua. So we were able to really understand the cultural context. Very often research will go into a country, collect some data and then go and analyze it without perhaps really understanding the context in which you collected that information. So we spent a long time in the field in the Caribbean coast, Nicaragua, and really saw how people lived on a daily basis. And when we therefore collected the data, the quantitative data, so the kind of studies that we do in the West, where we get people to give their opinions of images, to rate them, how attractive they are, or to answer questionnaires, things like that. So when we when we use these methods, we found what we found was kind of difficult to explain with the ways we'd measured it. So we went in thinking that we were going to make a comparison between villages with and without electricity, but there seems to be, in that particular cultural setting, some overlap between men seeking out certain types of media because it shows certain types of representations of men, and those representations of men having an effect on Nicaraguan men's ideas about what they should look like. So in other words, it's like we postulated that there already was in place in that particular cultural group an idea about a man, a masculine, the proper kind of man in that culture should look a certain way, should be muscular, should look like he goes to work. Because in that particular context, a muscular body indicates someone who does physical work. So they go to work. In Nicaragua, there aren't gyms, maybe in the capital, but in the small villages, the people don't go to the gym. So a muscular body connotes something else. It connotes someone that goes into the field to work or has a job, has a work doing farming or fishing or something like that. So yes, men are watching media showing muscular body types. They love action movies. The men there reported mostly watching action movies, watching sport. So they're already seeking out media that's particularly high on certain appearance standards for men. So those kind of two factors are sort of supporting each other. But on the other hand, although they like to have a muscular body, they don't have poor body image. Men are generally happy with their bodies, even if they might pick an image that shows they want to be more muscular attitudinally. So when we talk about body image and how you've got those different components, they don't feel unhappy with themselves.
So why do body image issues affect some Western men?
We call it internalization, where a person has in their mind this mental template of what they think they should look like, usually a template that they've constructed based on what they've seen in media imagery, and then thinking that they need to achieve that template in order to be happy, in order to be successful, in order to have a partner, in order to be attractive. Yeah. So it's this idea of believing you need to have that body type in order to be all the things that you want to be.
So it's maybe less about being exposed to images of different body types and more about being constantly told we're not good enough, that we need to change. Vera and Swami again.
I think the bigger problem is that we exist in a society that constantly tells us that we're deficient, that's constantly bombarding us with idealized images, whether it's on social media and advertising, on television and magazines. We are constantly being shown what are idealized images and being told, we're being sold a version of reality in which we are told that we are somehow inadequate. And beginning to talk critically about those societal changes that are required is much more important, because then I think you free the individual to make individual choices about what they want to do with their own body, while also deconstructing and dismantling the structures in society that lead to negative body image in the first place. I mean, like in the 1970s, there was a version of an argument which was put forward, which was simply that there are vested interests in society, the advertising industry, the beauty industry, and associated industries, which have a vested interest in making us all feel deficient because they are trying to sell us something. If you feel deficient in your appearance, you're going to go out and buy some new clothes or some new makeup or some new shoes or change that appearance. And that is inherently the issue that we're talking about here. I think focusing on the individual removes that agency from people and says to individuals, you can change, when actually what we should be talking about is whether or not we should change. Why do we accept this idea that feeling anxious, feeling dissatisfied, feeling even to some levels clinically debilitating experiences of negative body image are acceptable. I mean, whenever someone feels like they feel experiencing, for example, depression or depressive symptoms, we would suggest to them you should get some help, you should seek professional help. Whereas when we talk about body image, it's almost acceptable that we accept that large swathes of the population experience negative body image without requiring any form of professional or non-professional help.
So we're told we're not good enough, and we're bombarded with things that promise quick fixes. But what extremes might we go to?
So basically, one thing about me, which I'm very open about, is I actually have a condition called Aspergers syndrome. So I'm on a good bit of medication. I have been from I was about 5 years of age. And I've always been medicated for the condition. And I know one of I can't mind which pill it is that I have to take for it. One of the side effects of it is you just never lose your appetite. You're always hungry. You're always nearly checking the cupboards just to see what there is.
Josh Hewitt struggled with his weight and negative body image issues since childhood.
There was in our schools there was the football teams, there was rugby teams, and I the way I was just like, I don't even want to try this because I don't fit into the mold whatsoever. So I struggled greatly with body confidence issues. When I was maybe in high school, I was buying, say for example, in one of the shops in the shopping centre, in first year, which is our year 8, I was already buying large clothing. You stood in the mirror and just looked at yourself and you judge this, you judge that, and you're like, I know with myself, I was like looking in the mirror and I was like, at that age, I was, with my trail of thought, I was like, just thinking to myself, like, you're a mess, what have you done to yourself? Why have you got here? How have you got into this position? And all the thoughts run through your head when you were just looking in the mirror, brushing your teeth, something as simple as that. It was brutal, because I obviously as a kid suffered very badly with mental health problems, and then whenever you saw yourself, and doubting yourself, you're like, oh well, this is just making it 10 times worse. And there was times I didn't leave the house because I was unwell with the mental health, but I also didn't want people to actually see me.
As Josh's body image issues developed, he sought out increasingly drastic solutions.
So basically what happened to me was I was trying every diet under the sun, from eating 300-400 calories a day to intermittent fasting to a juice fast, and then even to the point where I was actually, if I eat something, I was just bringing it back up again by force. I tried literally everything. And I remember one day whether it came up in an article or something about the dangers of it, which probably should have alarmed me first of all. I remember I was like, oh wait, so I read into obviously didn't read about maybe someone passing away or someone being seriously injured. I read and I was to apparently get weight off in a week or 2 weeks or something like that. And I was like, right, I back then obviously can't stick a diet, obviously can't stick this, can't stick that. So I'll buy these. So there were only like 3 or 4 pound off eBay, and they were extreme fat burner or extreme diet pills, get weight off in 2 weeks or something. It was something obviously false promises. And I was like, okay, I'll try these. Basically, that's basically the way my head went. I wasn't even concerned what was in it. I didn't even care what was in it. I just cared about the way I looked and the way I wanted to look. And there's nothing telling me otherwise, if you know what I mean.
Despite being aware of the risks, the promises of fast results meant nothing was going to stop Josh. But it didn't go well.
Say I was sitting on a seat, television was on, was watching something, and then stood up to go and make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I was like, whoa, just sit back down again for a wee second. I never get a light head, never have before that, and never have had since. But I just got up and I was like, oh my goodness, I need to sit back down again. So I sat back down again, then got up again and was like, whoa, this is throwing me back down here. So I sat back down again, and then say for example walked to make the cup of tea or cup of coffee, and just started getting this pounding headache in between my eyes. but like not just a headache, but like a standard headache. It was like almost felt as if someone had a screwdriver and they were twisting a screw out or a screw in. It was really like sharp, almost like it was a nerve or something like that. And then I remember then as well, like, I completely forget the word for what it is, but it was whenever your chest, you could feel your heart pounding, and it was almost like, is this going to come out? Is this actually going to make a hole through my chest? Because there was just like the energy you had, but the pain that you had in your chest as well at times. And then just you were out for a walk and you were just like, and this is just a straight road, not uphill, not downhill. There was times you were just having to hold onto a wall or onto a fence to balance yourself.
After only a couple of days taking his online diet pills, Josh was suffering severe side effects.
And that was only about 4 days into the tablets, hence why I threw them out after that, because then at that point they became terrifying. So at that point I was like, no, I think it sort of wisened me up, if you know what I mean. I was like, no, this isn't normal. Like, it's whenever I think your proper trail of thought, the way it should be, kicked in. I was like, this isn't good. Like, I need to throw these out, because I think the last thing I wanted was my mum to come in and wake me up for whatever I was doing, and me being cold in bed, like, and something had happened to me. Like I was just gone. So I think what I done was like, okay, I don't want that to happen, nor do I want my parents to actually know that I've been on these tablets and that I've actually been, because like there literally could have been anything in them, and that's the scariest thing. So I was like, no, I just need to get rid. I just need to get rid. Basically, it was the way my head was back then, and I was so happy to take them, so excited to take them, until I realized, like, oh my goodness, I actually feel horrific on these, like, and you think back now at it, like now about 3 or 4 years later, and you're like, what would have happened if I took the 2-week dose? I know nothing good would have happened, but if I was feeling that ill after those 3 or 4 days, like, what would I have felt like after 2 weeks? Would I have still been here in 2 weeks? Would I still be, alive? Would I be seriously injured? Would something have happened to me from one of the ingredients?
Dodgy diet pills and extreme diets are on the more accessible end of the spectrum when it comes to people desperately trying to improve the way they look. Over recent years, there's been another worrying trend. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons reports that male cosmetic procedures, both surgical and non-surgical, rose 29% between the year 2000 and 2018. From muscle enhancement to tummy tucks, facelifts to hair transplants, more and more men are going under the knife in the search of perfection. One area of growth is in limb lengthening.
I'm Dr. Mahboubian. I'm an orthopedic surgeon who specializes in limb lengthening and deformity correction, as well as cosmetic height lengthening.
From his office in Burbank, California, Dr. Mahboubian is one of the leading specialists in making people taller.
I get people from all sorts of life and all different types of ages, but the most common type of patient that I get are guys that are in their 30s who are shorter than average. Most of my patients are shorter than average anyways. I mean, this procedure of the height lengthening where people become taller is designed more for people to, kind of get out of their short stature that they, that they have a stigma of. So I have people, from around the world that come in, do their consultations, and come in to get this procedure done, just to grow, a few inches, which makes a huge difference in their life. If you look at someone with, let's say they're flat feet and they wear a 1-inch heel, you can tell their difference in their height. So when they grow 2 or even 3 inches, it makes a big difference for them.
A word of warning though, those extra inches don't come cheap.
The total cost of the surgery, which involves the surgeon's fee, the hospital fees, the cost for the implants, as well as anesthesia. And, it really depends on whether you're doing your femurs versus your tibias. The tibias tend to be a little bit more expensive due to the technicality and duration of the procedure. But typically it's anywhere from 70 to 90,000 US dollars.
Nor can it be described as a quick fix.
Well, I mean, getting your bones broken is going to be painful no matter what. However, we do give enough pain medications to make all of our patients nice and comfortable. We get them started on physical therapy and get them moving. Once the swelling has kind of calmed down, which usually takes about a week to 2 weeks, then, the pain kind of subsides. Then you take on the pain that comes from the stretching, and which is due to the lengthening. So as you lengthen, you get this stretching type of pain, which is a little bit different. But people that are more flexible do really, really well, and their pain is pretty well controlled. I've had patients that only take Tylenol after their surgeries, but I've also had patients that need the stronger narcotic pain medications, at least for the first 2 to 3 weeks after their surgery.
And with any surgical procedure, there is always a risk involved.
So we account for any possible complications because I've been doing this for over 10 years and I've dealt and seen all sorts of different complications. Just as with any other surgeries, there's a risk of infection. So we give antibiotics for that to make sure that doesn't happen. There's a risk of developing blood clots after the surgery. So we put the patients on blood thinners while they're lengthening. So that usually takes about 3 months before they hit the end of the 8 centimeters. So they're on blood thinners during that time. There's a chance that, they may not develop enough bone. So we make sure that they take plenty of vitamin D and calcium and have a proper diet to make sure that their bone growth does well. There's a few other minor complications, but again, we account for all that stuff. And, I see my patients every 2 to 3 weeks to make sure that they don't develop any complications.
One thing that slightly troubled me about Dr. Mabouvian was his use of social media to promote his surgical options. In fact, he's become somewhat of a social media celebrity, with tens of thousands of people following him on Instagram and TikTok, where you can often see him proudly stood next to his patients in the before and after pictures. One worry I had was that maybe this kind of marketing would potentially promote body image issues.
No, I don't think my marketing promotes having these types of issues. I think it's out there. I think people come to me because of the issues that they have and the way society looks at people that are shorter. So, I provide a solution. I'm not there to discourage people for their height. I'm offering them a solution. And again, this surgery is not for everybody. They have to be ready to undergo a long recovery period. They have to have the finances for it, and they have to be motivated to undergo the procedure. So, they're the ones that come and seek my services, but I just put myself out there and let people know that they actually have an option, because not many people know that this surgery exists. And that's kind of my goal, is to let people know that they do have an option, that they don't have to live with being short for the rest of their life.
Certainly, while Dr. Mabouvian is using social media to his advantage, the stigma against short guys is real. We have common insults for short guys. Memes circulate around social media about how short guys are less manly or less successful. Female dating profiles on apps like Tinder list height restrictions like fairground rides. Imagine the outcry if a guy posted a maximum weight requirement for dates. So while insecurity and negative body image might start as a psychological issue, fed by societal ideals, surgery offers a relatively simple solution.
There is a psychological aspect to being short. And yes, this is one of the surgeries that you can actually cure that psychological problem with surgery. It's actually one of the only types of surgeries that could cure that mental aspect of it. But yes, there is, and again, time and time, I've seen my patients who are depressed and, they lack self-confidence due to their height. And after they go through the procedures, all that vanishes and they become just a completely different person. They have this amazing self-confidence about themselves and this willingness that they can accomplish anything in life after they go through the procedure. Going through the procedure is not easy. The recovery is a long recovery. They have to be on a walker for like 3 to 4 months. They have to constantly do therapy and stretch on a daily basis to make sure that they have a good outcome. So once they've gone through such a difficult recovery period, once they're out of it and they've recovered, I think they have the sense that they can accomplish anything after that.
So while the hunt for the perfect body can lead to expensive or risky solutions, there is another risk too, that we simply head in the opposite direction.
I think men end up going in two directions on this, so maybe sometimes even at the same time in their lives. On the one hand, we are drawn to try to keep our bodies in that ideal state, or make our bodies get into that ideal state, and we become obsessed with working out, say, or obsessed with dieting or with the food we eat, becoming almost narcissistic in terms of how often we're checking our body image. So there's a path that goes to try to meet that ideal that's not very healthy. And I think there's another path where we give up, essentially. We define ourselves as unable to meet that ideal, and almost go in the opposite direction of not being healthy. We become couch potatoes, is a term we have here in the United States, anyways, where we're just going to watch TV. We're not going to pay that much attention to our body or to our health overall. And there's a lot of evidence that men do not go to take care of their bodies in terms of going to the doctor regularly. And I know from experience with my wife as a senior fitness instructor that a lot of the people that go to senior fitness classes tend to be much more women than men. And those men, I think, sort of have defined themselves as unable to meet that standard. And so we abandon health altogether. So I think those are the two unhealthy paths we often take, of trying too hard to be super strong and giving up altogether.
Ed Franheim is co-author of Reinvented Masculinity. He points out that as well as the obvious risks to our well-being, striving for the body beautiful has some hidden dangers too.
They include the health nutritional risks of getting hooked on this lifestyle or diet that's about protein powders or nutritional supplements that may not be completely safe. It can extend to taking steroids as a means to getting that perfect body shape. So there's the sort of physical health risks, I think, but there's also the social health risks and kind of psychological health risks. On the psychological side, you don't ever become comfortable in your own skin as a guy because of this pressure to be have this perfect body. And we talk, in some ways, this is an issue that's been much more discussed among women. And I personally felt it, like feeling, relatively unworthy as a guy because I was skinny growing up. I was relatively athletic, but not in that kind of top tier of athletes, in my high school or college, even intramurals games. So there's a psychological cost of trying to feel like you're trying to meet that standard that's kind of impossible to reach. And I think there's also a social cost too at times. There was recently an interesting article in the New York Times about a lot of the current younger men who are these body image or body building icons in the social media world, and yet their own social lives are very cramped. They don't have a lot of friends or deep friendships because they're spending so much time in the gym. They're trying to work out and keep their body so perfect that they don't have the sort of relaxed friendships and social encounters that we know are healthy. And the irony is, as much as we talk about a healthy, strong body, it's pretty clear that the research on long lives and happiness shows that the most important factors for health and longevity are your social ties. And so if we let our focus on our body image get in the way of friendship, of connection, we're really not serving our own vitality in the long run.
If you're enjoying this podcast, support our work by leaving a rating or review on your favourite podcast app. The Problem with Men podcast.
So while we should learn to accept the bodies we have and the things our bodies allow us to do, it's easier said than done, especially in cases where people might have body dysmorphic disorder, or BDD. Jamie Fusner is a professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto.
Body dysmorphic disorder is a psychiatric disorder where people misperceive that certain aspects of their appearance are defective in some way or imperfect, and generally they think that these parts of their appearance make them look ugly and disfigured. And these are things that other people either don't see when they look at them, or if they see some kind of imperfection, it looks very small or minor. But the people with body dysmorphic disorder perceive these, and they believe that they're prominent, and they have these preoccupations, or you could call them obsessive thoughts about these appearance features, where they think about them a lot. It's difficult for them not to think about it. It intrudes in their life, and they have a lot of extreme emotions that are associated with it. So usually feeling down, like feeling depressed about it, feeling anxious, especially around other people, feeling shame. And then they do behaviors to try to fix their appearance or check their appearance in some way, to try to make it better, or to try to see if maybe it looks a little bit better today, or they just try to hide it in some way or avoid being around other people. So it's this combination of this misperception, they have these obsessive thoughts, and then they do these behaviors repeatedly to try to do something about their appearance. And body dysmorphic disorder can be a very severe disorder. In fact, the suicide attempt rate is about 25%. So about 25%, a quarter of people will try to end their life because of body dysmorphic disorder. And they often are majorly affected in terms of their functioning, not being able to work or to work well or to have meaningful relationships, or they're not doing well in school. And it is a relatively common problem.
I started to spend up to 10 hours a day in the mirror, just trying to perfect these so-called flaws that I thought I had, and it was, it's such a personal thing, the way you look, and when it's in your mind as well, and you're trying to stop these negative feelings from coming through, it can really develop into something quite nasty.
Danny Bowman started having issues with the way he looked after moving schools.
So I was 14 years old, and I just moved from kind of a small school, like sort of where I lived, to a kind of inner city school. And I just looked at everyone else, and I thought that everyone was just so much better than me, and everyone looked so much better than me. And I felt this immense pressure to try and improve the way I looked and improve the way I was. And that started, with small signs of kind of trying to improve my appearance slightly in the mirror, and then developed into something bigger as that kind of pressure increased. And at the same time, I was kind of scanning Facebook as well, and kind of looking at everyone else's lives, and I just felt everyone looked better than me, everyone was living a more exciting life than me, and I needed to improve, my own. So it got to a point when I was spending hours every single day in the mirror, trying to perfect my appearance.
BDD is a condition associated with obsessive compulsive disorder.
So it's about 1 in 40 people have body dysmorphic disorder. And many of the people who have it don't know that they have it. They believe that they just have a physical problem with their appearance, and that their reaction is kind of how anyone would react when they had such a physical defect. A lot of people have concerns about something related to their face or their head area. So kind of for the neck up is actually a very common part of the appearance that's disturbing, and skin is actually the most commonly common part of the appearance that people have concerns about, followed by hair and nose, but it can really be any part of the appearance. So common example might be that somebody perceives that they have, let's say, very prominent pock marks on their skin. maybe they had some acne, and then they thought they got some scarring from it, and they think that these pock marks make their skin look really ugly, very rough and disgusting looking, noticeable, from a far distance. And so they might check the mirror frequently. They might be in the mirror perhaps up to several hours a day, looking at it from different angles. They might be doing things to try to cover up the pock marks, like using skin products. They might be consulting with dermatologists about it or doing internet research about it. And they might spend several hours a day thinking about it. So that's a common example.
I'd normally wake up at 6:30 in the morning, usually after very little sleep the night before. I'd go to the bathroom. I'd then probably get stuck in the mirror for a good 2 hours, looking at myself, scrutinizing my skin, normally putting face creams on repetitively, scrubbing my teeth, relentlessly for a good 20 minutes, restyling my hair, picking at my weight, trying to get rid of any food that I might have in my body. And that was just the first 2 hours of the day. And then I'd usually go, to the main living area and take, up to 200 photos of myself, and then pull my appearance apart, zoom in on pictures I take, then delete them, see a flaw, then go back to the bathroom, try to perfect that flaw, and then just that over and over and over again for the entirety of the day without going outside for fresh air, because I couldn't, because I was worried that people would think I looked odd, or I would terrify them because the way I looked. It really was, and even talking about it now, it feels, it's making me feel quite tired. I would go to bed at normally about 11:30, in the evening, and like I said, wake up at 6:30 a.m. in the morning, usually with very little sleep in that period, but I'd go to bed anyway. And after such a long period of time, it really kind of broke me.
For Danny, it got to the point where he couldn't cope anymore.
If you can imagine your biggest critic in your head for 6 months continuously telling you you're inadequate, that would probably be the best way of capturing the 6 months that I experienced. And then within that moment, where I, decided to make the decision that I did, it was like being trapped in a room with no doors available to exit. It felt like I'd kind of used up all my options. I'd tried desperately, and even in that moment, I still felt like I had failed. I still felt like, oh well, I haven't achieved the perfection I set out to achieve. So I can't really go back to living a normal life because, well, I failed in my efforts to perfect my appearance enough to live a normal life. So even in that moment, and I think a lot of people with BDD, a lot of men and women with BDD feel this way. You constantly feel trapped and feel like you can't get out of this mindset and this way of thinking. It got to the point, I remember the day very, very, very clearly. It was a very, very rainy day in the northeast of England, which anyone who knows about the northeast of England, it's not abnormal to have a rainy day. But I remember just laying on my bed and just thinking, there's just no way out of this. It's 10 hours every single day of my life. I'm spending stuck in a mirror. I'm not living. Everyone else is getting on with their lives. All of these thoughts were kind of going through my head of, what am I doing here? I'm not living. I'm not achieving anything. Why am I here? And unfortunately, I instead of reaching out for help at that moment, which I should have done, I tried to take my own life. Luckily, my mum found me, and I was rushed to the local A&E department and given the care I needed.
If you're experiencing issues with your body image or think you might have BDD, then don't suffer in silence. There are links to resources on our website at theproblemwithmen.co.uk. To people who have never experienced BDD or body image issues, it can seem like trivial nonsense. But the struggles are real and can affect all aspects of a person's life. Jamie Fusner again.
People suffer so much from it, and another kind of layer of suffering that people have from it is that most other people don't really understand them, because these are people that, if you saw people with BDD, most of these people, they have normal appearance, they don't have anything major about their appearance that other people can notice, or they might have some minor things, because nobody's appearance is 100% perfect, but it makes it very hard because these people are suffering from perceiving that they look so ugly, but the people around them don't notice. And then if they try to talk to their friends or family about it, a lot of times they don't totally understand, because they're like, well, I don't understand what you're concerned about, because your skin looks fine. And they don't see it. And then they don't really trust the person, because they think the person is just trying to make them feel better, and by lying to them about it, or they think that other people think that they're vain or narcissistic, that they care too much about their appearance, that they shouldn't care so much about appearance, they shouldn't think about it as much, but they can't stop thinking about it because their brain won't let them. So they suffer.
There's so much, distortion of reality in the imagery we see these days, both in terms of, the lighting that's used, the photography, the editing of photos, but also in terms of the people that are very visible, the celebrities, the influencers. They have a very different set of resources than the average person. They may have personal trainers, they may have hairstylists, they may have personal chefs even. And, most of us just can't compete with that. We are not going to ever have those resources. And it's not our job to look good, right? A lot of the people that are highly visible, it is their job essentially to look good. And it kind of, I think, confuses so many of us and leads us to think that we should spend more time and energy on the pursuit to physical perfection than we really have or really should be spending.
Dr. Charlotte Marquet is a professor of psychology and director of the Health Sciences Centre at Rutgers University. She also recently published a book, Being You, the Body Image Book for Boys.
And this is why we focus so much on kids and adolescents and have concerns, because they often can't sort of sort through this in the way that adults are more capable of, right? So you and I can acknowledge that this is sort of messed up. This is not realistic. This is impossible standard. But younger people don't have those same sort of metacognitive skills, and they can't necessarily think through and reason through sort of this dilemma in the way that adults can.
Charlotte has been researching body image for 25 years and has become alarmed at the way body image issues are impacting younger and younger people.
A study conducted just a few years ago showed that even 6-year-old boys were saying that they thought they would look better if they had muscles, if they had more muscles. So 50% of 6-year-old boys. 6-year-olds can't really develop muscle mass. So this is kids starting to think about these things for whatever reason, before it's even really physically possible, it really suggests that this is becoming pretty deeply rooted as a concern for young people. We say when you are unable to engage in sort of your regular life in the way that you want to because you're consumed by other thoughts or worries, that's in some ways the absolute definition of mental illness. And so even if, and this is what we see in boys and men more often than girls and women, even if inherently the behaviors are healthy, like running or weightlifting, if they take over all that mental space, then it isn't healthy anymore. Yes, there was actually a study in the States recently that 40% of teenage boys have used clinically untested supplements like protein powders. So we're starting to see it becoming really mainstream for even young people to go to fairly extreme lengths to try to look a certain way. And that can be very risky. It's so much worse in the US too, because we don't regulate. Our Food and Drug Administration does not regulate these sorts of products. And in the UK, there's more attention to this. So the likelihood of products available being safer is higher, but there's still not a lot of research looking at how different supplements affect growing people. And we, want young people, especially in the midst of puberty, to not disrupt that normal development by taking unnecessary products into their bodies.
One of the areas of Charlotte's research has touched on how our behaviour around food and body can affect our kids, even if to us something is quite subtle.
And so it seems to emerge really as young kids become social, as they start to interact with peers, and they become more aware of the world around them. I think parents need to be aware of the likelihood of body dissatisfaction among both their sons and daughters, and that the seeds for this dissatisfaction are sown in early life, but that often this really manifests during puberty, during adolescence. And there are things that parents can do to try to prevent body dissatisfaction from emerging. And some of that has to do with just modeling a healthy relationship with food and positive body image ourselves. Well, many of us grew up in households where parents maybe were on diets often, always trying a different eating regimen of some sort or another, or often disparaging their own bodies, right? So I feel so fat, or do these jeans make me look big, or whatever. We grew up hearing adults saying things like this, and so it feels very normal and natural to say it, yet it can be somewhat toxic. We really want our kids to have a healthy relationship with food so that they're not worrying about food, but enjoying it and nourishing themselves appropriately. And we also don't want them feeling self-conscious about their body and that it's normal to hate your body. That's not really a healthy way to go through life. And for many of us adults, that means kind of relearning some of this, or reframing, working on our own mental health a little bit, and being more self-compassionate and self-accepting, and appreciating that our bodies are imperfect, and most people's are, and that's not something to feel bad about.
So it seems kids that are growing up and learning about the world are incredibly at risk of developing problematic body image issues. It feels like it would be a great idea for someone to write a book to help young boys understand their body, how they see themselves, and how to have a healthier view of their body.
Yeah, you can go to thebodyimagebooksforboys.com and you can find Being You, the Body Image Book for Boys. And I think it's really the only book out there that really focuses on body image in boys. So the focal point is body image, but it really is a resource that addresses both psychological and physical health more broadly. I think we really need to work on normalizing conversation about health among boys and men in general, that most boys and men just aren't socialized to be really comfortable talking about their health or getting help when they have a health problem, and that's to their detriment. So as a psychologist, it's incredibly important to me that messages about what health is, what you should do if you have concerns about your health, who you should talk to, those sorts of things I want out there in the public discourse much more than they currently are.
As for the rest of us, Ed Franheim has a few ideas.
In the book that I co-authored, we talk about these 5 C's from moving from a more confined, conventional set of masculine beliefs to what we call a liberating sense of your manhood or your masculinity. And the first one is curiosity. Like, can we be curious and question the norms that have been put out for us? And I hope we can answer some of those questions and say, no, I don't necessarily think this is wise for us to obsess about being, having a body like The Rock, say. And then, the next one is about courage. And can we be brave enough to say, not just go into a burning building, say, or take financial risks, but take risks emotionally and, explore our feelings in the way we've been wounded around some of these body images, which begins the healing process. Speaking of that, the next one is compassion. And that is about really self-compassion besides compassion for others. And that sense of being kind to ourselves about our bodies and the extent to which we can build create a body that is similar to that ideal, or and realizing we're probably not going to get there given most of our lives experiences and how much time we can spend on working out. The next one is connection, where again, this is actually the research shows that our social connections are more important to our long-term health than our body strength and being able to be looking like a bodybuilder. And lastly, the C that we talk about is commitment. And can we kind of stick with this more mature view of health and self-worth and body image, so that we can actually enjoy our bodies, as you say, and feel whole in them? I'm pretty sure, based on my research and the work we've done with my co-author on the psychology of men, where we're not easy on ourselves, and one of the ways we beat ourselves up is around this question of our bodies. And it really, I hope we can take a longer-term view of body image, so that we're addressing the issues of men at all ages and helping them feel, healthy and comfortable and whole in their bodies.
Thank you for downloading and listening to this episode of the Problem with Men podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about any of the topics discussed in this episode, you can find help, resources, and extra reading on our website at theproblemwithmen.co.uk. Until next time, goodbye.
The Problem with Men podcast is an Octopus Industries production, produced and presented by Chris Dodd and produced by Sandra Kabasinguzi.